going over a step-by-step process of how to make tamales. Now, tamales are a favorite holiday food. They're eaten throughout the whole year, but I definitely think of tamales and the holidays, Christmas time, and a lot of Mexican tradition. Myself as a kid, our family would get together and we would have, a tamalada, where everybody would kind of get together, put the work in, and we'd make tamales for everyone. Let's get started. So let's go over what you will need to make tamales. First, you need hojas, or the leaves of the corn leaves, hojas. These are very important. This is what the tamales are wrapped in. They also add some flavor to it. Okay, you have your hojas. You also need chiles, two types of chiles, dried chiles. We have chile ancho and chile guajillo. These can be bought dry. You can find them at H-E-B, at your other grocery stores as well. This is a really good brand, Chiles Don Chano. I use these a lot in the kitchen, and it's really good to make chile en adobo. Okay, today we're gonna be making tamales with beans. Now there's all types of fillings. For me, that's my favorite. I like a good bean tamal. You definitely need some oil. You're gonna need some garlic, comino or cumin, and then of course, you will definitely need some tamal masa. And this is important to know that masa for tamales is not the same as the masa we use for tortillas. It's not as ground down, it's not as fine, and it's definitely a lot different. I've never used tortilla masa to make tamales, so I'm not sure what the difference would be. Maybe they don't come out as good, but Maseca sells this. You can find a lot of different varieties at H-E-B. If everybody has their personal preference, I know there's certain tortillerias sometimes, and they sell just their own masa too, already pre-made. But today we're gonna do this from scratch, starting from the beginning. All right, so let's make a little space. In Adan's recipe, it says you can soak for a minimum of 30 minutes at least, but if you really want them to be ready for the tamales, you want them to be soaking overnight. So something to definitely I wanted to explain is that tamales are kind of a long process. It takes a couple days, and if you have a lot of family members, maybe in your house or your immediate family, put them to work and have them help you too. Doing this together, at the very end, you get to enjoy it knowing that everybody helped. So make sure to have your hojas soaking, and then we're gonna start the beans. So beans generally, this is something that in our conversations with Adan kind of came up as well, that pinto beans are mostly used, I think of, tamales with pinto beans, but in the north of Mexico, but in southern Mexico, Guatemala, different places, there's more of a preference for black beans. It's up to you, whichever one you like. For today, we're gonna be using pinto beans. First thing you wanna do with beans, of course, is to clean them. They are directly harvested from the ground, so every once in a while you'll find like a little rock or like a withered bean, right? So you want to make sure to get all those out. I also take any of the ones that are split out as well, or if you find like loose skins or casings, you take those out too. Basically, the reason you want to do this is because you want all the beans to be cooked through and be consistent. Okay, so once your beans are clean, then we're gonna want to soak them. Now you can do a quick soak where you bring the water to a boil and you can cook the beans in about 3-4 hours, or the best way to do it is to leave your beans soaking overnight. So by the time you come in the morning, you see the beans are gonna be nice and full, and this is very important too. I always add a lot of extra water. You can never have too much water. Also be aware that these beans, although they're small, when they soak, they're gonna get bigger. So you always wanna have at least 2 inches of water covering the beans. You want them covered completely. Once they soak, you can rinse that, you can drain that beans, put them back to boil, and then boil them until they're cooked. You can tell they're cooked because you can take one out, and if you squeeze it between your fingers all the way through, they're done. All right, once your beans are cooked and ready to go, you get that process going, then we need to start making the chile paste. And this is the end product. This is the chiles guajillos, and we'll go through this step by step. But this is very important because you use this not just for the beans, you also use it for the masa. And this gives the tamal so much flavor. Without it, I don't think the tamal would even be the same. So to get started with that, we need to clean and then rehydrate. We need to de-seed, I'm sorry, and then devein these chiles. Now there's a couple ways that I like to do it. You want to make sure the stem comes off. Usually what I'll do with a paring knife, a good paring knife is a good friend of yours. I'll put a hole right here close to the stems, and I'll hold it, a hole just big enough to put my finger in. I'll hold it upside down, and then here I pop the stem off, trying to leave as much of the flesh of the chile as possible. And then once it's upside down like that, I open it up, and if you hear that, all those seeds are coming out. So like that, you can get most of the seeds off. Now you want to split them. I like to pop the stem off because then I get my paring knife. I put it right inside, cutting away from me, and I open it up right down the side. Now as I open it, you'll see a few more seeds. You want to make sure you get all of those out. And then also where these seeds are attached, there's like these veins that are on the sides of the chile. You want to get those out as well. This is important because if you leave the seeds in, you're going to get a very bitter flavor. I do remember once I ate a chile relleno, which is a very good dish. And I guess the restaurant that I was at, they left the seeds in, and it just was a completely different flavor. It was bitter, and it was not good. So make sure you get those de-seeded, deveined. You're good to go with that one. Same process here. I cut right there, take the stem off, hold it upside down, and empty them out. Now this is a chile ancho, which was a green chile before. And then this is a chile cascabel or guajillo. And I like that it's cascabel because if you shake it with the seeds inside, it sounds like a rattler, right? Sounds like a baby rattle. So same process. You're gonna wanna do this for 3 of the chile anchos and 3 of the chile guajillos. So make sure all those seeds are out. I put the knife inside and then split it right down the side, all the way to the bottom, making sure I get all those seeds out. And these don't really have very pronounced veins, but you can see right here, you gotta make sure you take that vein off. All right, once you have these chiles cleaned, de-seeded, and deveined, then we're gonna want to soak them in water. In a large saucepan, cover them in water, bring them to a boil, and then let them steep for about 15 to 20 minutes. Right now these chiles are dried, right? They're crumbly, they're crackly. Once they're boiled and steeped for a while, you'll take them out and they'll be nice and soaked and wet, and they'll be ready to make the paste. Now, the chile paste is more than just the chiles. We're also going to be adding a clove of garlic. I usually put a little bit more. I like garlic, especially in my beans. So I'll put maybe like a diente and a half, like a little bit extra. So you take your clove out. I guess a couple tips. I usually cut the top off like this. And sometimes garlic is really tough to peel, right? Kind of getting difficult to get that skin off. So what I do, if I had a bigger knife, it's a little bit easier, but I crush it, and then it's easier to take the skin right off. Little tip. There you go. So that garlic's gonna go in there. You're also going to add, let me just double check to get this right. You're gonna have your 3 chiles anchos, your 3 chiles guajillos, a half a teaspoon of comino. You can add more to taste if you really like that comino flavor. 3/4 of a cup of water, a little bit of oil, and then of course salt to taste. Salt is very important. I used to not eat much salt in my food, but now I definitely add a lot because throughout the cooking process, you need it to bring out the flavors. Now, all of these things that we said are gonna go into your blender, or if you have a molcajete, you can do it by hand too, but what you really want is to get it to be a nice watery consistency, right? So once you get a blend, then there's a little bit more steps. You're gonna have a nice thick paste. You're gonna wanna return to your saucepan, get some hot oil going, add the paste in there. We wanna kind of fry the paste for maybe no more than a minute. You see it'll kind of change color. And once you get it kind of popping and frying, then you're gonna add some more water and then bring it down to simmer and reduce it down to this kind of consistency. That's really gonna bring the flavors out. Be sure to add salt as well. You can't forget the salt. That's a very important part. Okay, once you have your chile paste done, then we're on to our next step, which is gonna be finishing off the beans. So you brought your beans to a boil. They're all done. You're gonna get a big saucepan, drain the beans, keep some of the water though. Add your beans, add a little bit of the water, and then start kind of boiling them. And with the masher, you're gonna wanna mash them down to be a nice, thick consistency. Once they're getting mashed and when that water is in there, or what this recipe calls for is to add 3 whole tablespoons to all the beans that you have. So that flavor is gonna come out in the beans as well. You reduce them. Usually the way I know that they're done is if I have a masher that has a flat bottom, I put the masher on top of the beans, and once it can sit on top and be solid, then they're done. You want to cook those low and slow, at low heat for a good amount of time. I spent about 30 minutes last night reducing these beans, but they're very, very delicious. So your chile paste is done. Your beans are set. Your hojas are soaked overnight. Now comes one of the most important parts, the masa. And I know there's a lot of different opinions. I've heard different ways of making masa, but the magic, I believe, is in the masa. That's where the flavor really comes out. Now, as we mentioned, you can get the tamal masa at any grocery store. There's a lot of different varieties, but make sure you get the tamal one, not the one for tortillas. That makes a big difference. Now, as for the masa, you are going to use 1 pound of the maseca, along with half a cup of canola oil, and then some water as well. Now, this is something important, and I'm going to be honest, I haven't made tamales in a long, long time since I did with my family, and I know that my masa isn't quite as smooth as it should be. And I think what I didn't do is heat the oil enough to really get in there. So once you get some of your masa, you want to put it in a big bowl. Now with the masa, you're going to get a big bowl. You're going to heat your canola oil. And in this recipe, this is Adan's recipe, and he mentions that all of these ingredients were here before, or in Mexico, were being used to make tamales before the Spanish brought things in like lard, like pigs and lard, right? So oil was being used instead of animal fat. I used oil for this one. You can also use vegetable shortening. You can also use lard. The flavor is different. I believe in my eyes, there's no bad tamal. I think they're all good, but definitely I think there's a preference for using lard, that manteca. It gives it a certain flavor. So your oil, your lard, whatever you're using, you want to heat that up. You want to heat it up in a pan until it's almost popping, until it's almost, really, really hot. And that's important because then you're going to pour it straight into the masa. If you have a stand blender, a tabletop blender, that's really helpful because you don't have to get your hands in there with the hot oil. That, adding water as needed to eventually get it consistency to be thicker than pancake batter, right? That's kind of what we're going for. So there you go. Now we have our main ingredients ready to go. We have our masa, our hojas, our filling, and now it's just about making the tamales. Okay, so I prepped a couple right here with the masa, but I'll do one for y'all as well. So here's the hoja. I'm holding it kind of upside down. Usually I'll put it in my hand right here. You want to start about 3 inches from the bottom and then spread the masa across. For Adan's recipe, he calls for 2 tablespoons. So usually I'll spoon it on and then spread it. And then this is what I meant in that my masa could be a little, I guess pastier. So there's 1 And then I like a lot of masa on my tamales. So here's two. So spread it across. You definitely want to cover this as much as possible. All the way to the top. And I'm going to add more. Some hojas are larger than others as well. So be aware of that. I usually kind of put them in just right here in the middle. My girlfriend was helping me, and she did it like this, all the way across the hoja. And we'll show you like the differences once we do that. So you have your masa in your hoja. Now you add your filling. This is going to be about half of the masa that you put in. So instead of 2 tablespoons, I'm going to put 1 tablespoon of beans, running a line right down the middle. Ooh, we kind of put a lot in here. And there you go. So there's one. I'm going to do one here. And what I was mentioning earlier, I definitely have fond memories of my family getting together around the kitchen table. Everybody was helping make tamales. Somebody was making the filling, somebody was making the masa, and then my job as a little kid was to do this part, to do the prepping and the spreading. And to make it faster, we even had kind of like a conveyor belt system where one person would spread the masa, the next person would add the filling, and the next person would fold them up and put them in the steamer. So we're almost done. We're here at our last steps. Now it's time to close the tamal. So first, you fold one edge over, then you fold the other. You definitely want to make sure that it's closed, and this is the important part. That's why you left a little bit extra at the bottom. You fold that up, and there is your tamal, ready to go into the steamer. I'm going to do the same thing for this one. So fold one edge over, and this is kind of a big hoja, and then fold the other one. Same thing, right there at the bottom. Now I mentioned the difference between just adding filling here in the middle versus adding filling all the way across. And this is interesting because when you cook, you're gonna have that little extra that comes in right here. To be honest, that's kind of my favorite part. That little extra part that gets like really, really well cooked. And there you go. So this is definitely, certainly something to do with family. And at the end, you get to share them. Now, the way we cook them is with the steamer. These come in a variety of sizes. You can find them at the grocery store. You'd want something that has a compartment at the bottom for your water, right? This is gonna be the water that circulates, that steams the tamales. So the way this is usually done is you have your steamer, you make sure your water's in there. As you're making your tamales, you stand them up. And this is kind of a shallow one, so that might be a little bit tall there, but you wanna stand them up. If you had a larger steamer, you can make a whole batch of them, all stood up like this, boca arriba, with the opening facing up. And then when you cover it, before you cover them, you want to cover them with some hojas. If you have leftover hojas, make sure you put some on the side, make sure they're soaked. You put the hojas on top, and then you cover all of that with a clean kitchen towel. This is gonna make sure that the tamales stay moist. If you've ever maybe over-steamed the tamal or tasted one that's very dry and kind of falls apart, this is the important step that maybe got missed. You gotta make sure you add hojas on top, the kitchen rag as well, plenty of water, and you cook 40 to 50 minutes. Once they're done, you wanna take them off heat. You wanna let them sit for a little bit. If you get right into them, it's kind of like when you first cook a burger. If you eat it right away, all the juices are gonna come out. So you wanna let them sit, let the oil sit in the masa, and then make sure you share with somebody else. So, thank you all for joining us today.